oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours. You are mine. Your grace abounds in deepest waters. Your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed, and you won't stop now. So I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, and you are Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of
So the other day I got a message on Facebook that said, "John, I love the message of your videos, but not if it's coming from you. There are choices you've made in your past that render you not qualified to spread such a message." And for me, that was hard to hear, because the hypocritical Christian is something I fear. To be put in a category like that, I could think of nothing worse. So maybe there's something I should have said first. You see, I can't and won't and don't claim to be perfect. In fact, most times I'm not even good. I'll take responsibility for the mistakes I've made and the hurts I've caused. I got more than I probably should. But would God use that against me, making good coming from my life impossible? Forgives me but refuses to use me? I don't believe in that gospel. I believe in the God of Moses. Moses was an orphan and a murderer with a stutter and a price on his head. Yet God chose this killer to be a fulfiller, performing miracles, leading his people, and making rivers flow red. I believe in the God of David. David, the shepherd boy who turned into a king, a terrible father and an adulterer from the start. Yet even with wrongdoings and iniquity, we remember him as the man after God's own heart. Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, living a life without direction. Matthew was a tax collector, the lowest of the low, yet they both walked and talked and witnessed Christ's perfection. Did God choose the Pharisees, the self-righteous and pompous, full of laws and pretension? Or did he choose cowardly Peter and persecuting Paul to spread the message of Christ's redemption? All these heroes in the Bible, not a one of them was likely. Leaning not on themselves, they leaned on God. And you know what God is? He is mighty. So can God use me, a broken, steaming mess? And can God use him or her or you? I'm here to tell you right now that the answer is yes. God can and will use anybody, even if you only go to church on Christmas. Does he only speak through the preacher? No, God is in a different business, because believing in the Lord isn't living a perfect Walgreens life, always doing right. It's letting his light shine from within and letting his word be your tutor. He'll take your broken past, helping you step into a more hopeful future, because it wasn't for perfection that Jesus died on that cross. It was for the unhealthy, so the sick could serve the sick and seek and save the lost. Because in the end, these words and these lights and these cameras and this video, it's not about me. It's about God. And with God, it's never about who you were, but about who you will be. It's God's story for the world, and we're just playing our parts. So if you're out there feeling not qualified, that's great. Because not qualified is where he starts.
Wow. Hi, beautiful ladies. Is that an awesome video? I love that. Sitting there, you know what? All the ladies get nervous. This has been an awesome morning, but we're nervous. We want things to go right, right? It's not about all of this, right? It's not about whether the schedule goes right, whether there's a mix-up with the videos, whether there's a glitch. It's about you. It's about God. It's about you getting what you can from this weekend, okay, from these 2 days. But I just want you to know that everyone in this room hasn't always felt qualified. We still don't feel qualified to be used by God. I'm Stacia Cox, first of all. And I'm privileged to be here. I'm excited to be here to share with you beautiful ladies. I just want to share a little bit about me. I have never felt qualified. I've never felt good enough to be used by God. I grew up in an abusive home. I know a lot of you have wounds from your, childhood. When I was 12 years old, I was taking a bath, and my father got upset because the door was locked. So he kicked the bathroom door in. That's the kind of life I live. That's how I grew up. I grew up in constant fear. A lot of you have experienced that. And there was also some sexual abuse in my past, okay? That creates a lot of wounds. You've heard us talk a lot about wounds this morning. We all have them, girls, and that creates shame. And we feel like we're not worthy to be used by God. And I want each of you to know that God wants to use you. He wants to use you. He has, thank you, honey. He has a special role for you in this life, a special purpose. Oh, that's better. So, if you could relate to that, if you could relate to any of that, like, wow, that felt like me, that feels like me right now, then this talk is for you. I'm here today because of a huge wound in my life. Mark and I, my husband's here, supporting me on my little talk here. Our fourth child is in heaven. She went to be with the Lord back in November of 1997. That is one of the hugest wounds in my life, okay? After 3 perfect births, perfect children, perfect births, no complications whatsoever. She was a stillborn. They still don't know what happened, but it is a tremendous wound in my heart. For anyone that's ever lost a child, you realize that is a huge hole in your heart, okay? But God has used that. God had other plans for that. Because of that huge wound in my heart, I stand before you today. That's why I'm part of WWC. And because of that, sometimes we don't know why bad things happen, but God knows. He has a plan. He has a plan for our lives. Because of that, 25 girls in India have a home. Let me get back to my notes. I heard Dominic and Lindsay Russo speak. You heard Donna Joyner earlier talk about the dinner that she went to at Sue Younger's house. The night before that, there was a meeting, and Dominic and Lindsay spoke, and they shared about Angel House and how they were building orphanages. And the Lord said to me, you need to build a home in memory of your daughter. So we had a break. I met with Dominic. I said, I'm building a home for Britain. Okay, I want to build something in her name. I always wanted to do something in memory of her, just to save children and just to keep her name, her memory alive. Okay? So because of that, I went to that dinner the next night with Donna. A few months later, the whole WWC came about. But because of that, I opened an orphanage. We started with WWC, opened an orphanage in India for 25 girls. Now, but we've done so much more than that, girls. There have been hundreds and thousands of children's and women's lives changed because of that huge wound in my heart. See, God's going to use that. He's going to use those wounds. He's going to use those hurts that you think you're never going to get over. Oh my gosh, I'm never going to be put back together. I'm so broken. How can he ever use me? He's going to use you to bless others. Jesus tells us in John, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. We're all going to have trouble, right? We're going to have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. He came to overcome the world. Praise God. We're all going to have wounds in our life, but he wants to use them for good. So, who in here likes movies? Anybody? I love movies. We always go to the movies, although we haven't been in a while. We've been a little bit busy. But love movies, okay? I'm going to share with you guys a movie. And it's going to be 4 acts, okay? We're living in a story. We're living in God's story. In Act 1, the Word became flesh. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It's important for us to know there was something before us, okay? There was something here, something strong, real, and it's inviting us into the story. That's why it's important for your children to know that you and your partner, your spouse, your other half, you love each other more than them, okay? It's important for them to know that foundation is there. That way they feel safe. There's a larger story there, and that they're not responsible for keeping it together. So John's talking about the Trinity here, a heroic fellowship. We long for fellowship. Don't you guys agree? We long for fellowship. That's our heart. That's relationships. That's women. That's our heart. We want relationships. We long for that. Nothing brings us more joy and nothing brings us more pain than our relationships. Deepening our relationships. It wounds us. It wounds us when our relationships are bad. We long for that intimacy because we were born into that perfect intimacy with God. The invitation of the gospel is fellowship. It's a fellowship with God. That's what he wants, that personal relationship with Jesus. That's what he wants you to have. It's not just an invitation to be a good girl or to live a good life. That's what a lot of us think. A lot of us think, I just have to be a good girl. I just have to live a good life. It's not about that. He wants to have a personal relationship with you, with each of us, day in and day out. He wants to help you with your hurts. So that's Act 1. Okay? Act 2, God creates angels. These beautiful, incredible, powerful creatures. They're not quite what you see, in the movies. There's lots of movies with angels, right? Just a few. There's Angels in the Outfield. Anybody see that one? Right? Great movie. We just went to an angel game a few weeks ago and we were talking about Angels in the Outfield, right? Great movie. Anybody see Angels in the Outfield? Okay, gotta love that classic movie. How about It's a Wonderful Life? Right? Angels in there, right? Heaven Can Wait. City of Angels. Hey, even John Travolta was an angel in a movie. Did you guys see that one? Michael, right? Right? That was a great one. There's lots of movies. Heaven is for Real. That's one out there right now. There's a few angels in that movie. Okay, just saw that one. But they're not quite what you see in the movies. They're big, huge, powerful, amazing angels. When man encountered an angel in the Bible, they fell flat on their face. Okay? It only took 2 of them to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. At the end of the age, it will only take 4 angels to destroy the earth. That's how powerful they are. There was one angel that was exceedingly beautiful. He was captain of the guard. He was highest of all angels. He let it all go to his head. He wanted to become God, right? He thought he was all that, right? He thought, I can do that. I'm beautiful. God created me beautiful. I think I just want to do what he does. I want God's job, okay? So there was a war in heaven. God won. He cast Satan out. Jesus said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. God wins. But Satan prowls the earth. He prowls the earth like a lion, searching for those he can devour. He's real, you guys. Do you understand? He's real. God has a plan for your life, but the enemy, Satan, is constantly trying to mess that up. He whispers in your ear, you're not good enough. You can't do this. What are you doing? Yeah, she's up there talking about God has a plan for your life, but she's not talking about you. No, she's not talking about you. She's talking about everybody else, but not you. No, she doesn't know what you've been through. She doesn't know the crap you done, right? She's not talking about you. He whispers doubt. Okay? He doesn't always do it in those, big ways. He does it in those subtle little ways. So you have to be careful, and you're going to hear about that more later. But he whispers, can you really trust God? Can you really trust him? And as women, we have trust issues anyway. I know I did because of my past and the wounds that I have in my heart. I had a lot of trust issues. I wanted to control things. I thought, if I could just control it, if I could just control my situation, then everything will be okay. It caused problems in my marriage, caused problems with my children, caused problems with my relationship with the Lord, right? Caused problems with everything. So Satan will whisper to you, can you really trust God? Can you really trust his plan? It's safer just to do nothing and just sit back and do nothing. So Act 3. This is where we come in. God creates the world, and it's beautiful. It's gorgeous, it's amazing, it's stunning, it's magnificent. He creates everything, all this just to win our hearts. You've seen movies, right? You've seen movies about creation, the Bible, the series. You guys, some of you watched that recently. Just amazing. Think of the most beautiful place you've ever been to. Hawaii, the Bahamas, wherever you've ever been that was like your most beautiful vacation. It's more gorgeous than that. Okay, beautiful. It says the stars sang together and the angels shouted for joy. Doesn't that just sound amazing? Just picture that. The stars sang together and the angels shouted for joy. Doesn't that just sound beautiful to you? Then he creates man. Genesis 1:26 says, then God said, let us make human beings in our image. In our image, he's talking about the Trinity there. To be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So, we were made in God's image to have that relationship with him, to be his ally. We're invited up into his larger story as his most precious allies and friends. That's why we have the hearts we have. That's why we long for that relationship. By design, our creation reveals that we have been asked to play a part in the greatest love story of all time. Guys, it's the greatest love story. The best love story you've ever seen, Titanic, any of those movies. Okay? This is better than that. It's better than that. By design, our creation reveals that we have been asked to play a part in the greatest love story of all times. He gave us 3 things. Please write this down. I hope you're using your little workbooks because they're amazing. There are some great questions in there you should be asking yourself during the quiet times. But these 3 things are not in there. He gave us 3 things. He gave us mind, which is the spirit, to know him. The second thing is heart, which is emotions, to love him. And then he gave us will, which is freedom to obey him. So he gave us mind, heart, and will. Spirit, emotions, and freedom. Isn't that wonderful? So we're all different. But we have the spirit the mind to know him, the heart to love him, and the will to obey him. We are invited up into his larger story as his most precious allies and friends. God wants us to trust him in a broken world. We live in a broken world. It's very easy to get caught up in that and be saddened by that. But we get caught up in the problems and gossip and all of that. In Genesis chapter 3, God says, what have you done? What have you done? Why are you hiding? When he finds Adam, right? And he's eaten from the tree. And what does Adam do? He blames Eve. Right? She made me do it. Right? None of your spouses have ever done that. It's her fault. She made me do it. God says, you gave your heart away to my worst enemy. God gave us the kingdom and we gave it away. He promises a rescue. I will come for you. We watch it unfold through Noah, Abraham, people of Israel. He's searching for allies, searching for people that will trust his heart. People that will be part of his love story. Isn't that wonderful to know that you're part of a bigger story? I love that. I love that, just to know that. When Jesus comes into the story, he tells the plot. He's baptized by God, by John. He goes into the wilderness, has a showdown with Satan. Satan wants Jesus to worship him. And Jesus refuses. He's the only one that does. He goes into Jesus comes back after he refuses, goes into the synagogue to begin his ministry, and he opens the scrolls and he reads Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me. For the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to comfort the brokenhearted and to proclaim that captives will be released and prisoners will be freed. Isn't that beautiful? To comfort the brokenhearted. He wants to heal your broken heart, ladies. We all have broken hearts. We've all been brokenhearted over something, and we all have wounds. You have an irreplaceable role in God's story. Jesus came to rescue you. He came to rescue me and all of us in this room. God's the author of your story. We're living in Act 3. So Act 4 is heaven. It's heaven. Isn't that awesome? I love to talk about heaven. I can't wait. That song, I can only imagine. Who in here loves that song? Every time I hear that song, I'm like, oh, don't you just see yourself at Jesus' feet? We're going to be there. We're going to be able to worship with him forever. I love that. I'm going to see my daughter. She's going to be there, right? Praise Jesus. She's going to be there. Okay? There's no pain, no sickness, no cancer, no hurting. We're going to have new bodies, right? We're all going to have heavenly bodies. It's going to be amazing. Okay. So, you're living in the greatest story that's ever been told. But God wants you to play a part. He wants you to play a part. He wants you to play a leading role, not just a supporting role. He doesn't just want you to be an extra or a cameraman. No offense to the cameramen. You guys are awesome. We love you. Love you. Right? He doesn't want you to be a backstage hand. He wants you to be a leading role. But you have to get out of your comfort zone. Okay? And God's calling you to get out of your comfort zone. Here's God's plan for your life. All the great things God has that you can do, that he wants you to do. All the dreams, Sue talked about it. The seeds of greatness God's put in your heart. And here's your comfort zone. And you're stuck in that comfort zone because of fear, because you're scared of getting hurt again, of getting wounded. To trust. You're scared to trust other people, but mainly God with your heart. So you have to break out of that, girls. You have to trust. You have to trust God. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future." He wants us to trust him, ladies. You know, we didn't all have an earthly father that we could trust. I definitely couldn't trust mine. But we have a heavenly Father we can trust. And he wants you to trust him. I have a slide real quick. We just sang that song, Oceans. And I love that song. That's like one of my favorite songs now. We actually went to the Hillsong Conference here in LA last year and saw Hillsong sing this. And they sang it over and over and over, probably 10 times literally throughout the conference. It was amazing. But that's it right there, girls. I will call upon your name. Keep my eyes above the waves. You have to keep your eyes above the waves, because if not, you're going to sink. That means keep your eyes looking up to him. My soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours and you are mine. You have to trust. Trust that he wants what's best for you and that he is going to make your wounds your purpose. I'm living my purpose now because of the greatest wound in my life. That I never thought anything for good was going to come out of that, but it did. So that's the larger story. God wants you to be part of it, but you have to get out of your comfort zone. And it's scary, girls, it's scary. When I first thought about opening an orphanage and being part of WWC, it scared me. It scared me. But I knew that it was something I wanted to do. I wanted to do in honor of my daughter. And then I got passionate about it. Then I saw what was going on with sex trafficking, which you're going to hear from the awesome Brad Riley in a second. And then I got passionate. And then the Lord made me more passionate and more passionate. And now I'm living my purpose for the kingdom. He wants to do the same for you. So, with that, I have the privilege of introducing this awesome guy. We're going to watch a video, but Brad Riley is amazing. He's with iEmpathize. He's the founder and president of iEmpathize. His mission is to eradicate child exploitation, and he's doing that. Guys, he's on the ground floor. He's out there educating in the high schools, in the middle schools. He's doing some amazing stuff. And they're making a big difference, not only in the U.S., but internationally. And he's going to share with you what they're doing. We're just going to show a quick video, and then he's going to come up and share with you. So thank you.
I just wanted to show you our latest update video from a 75-day road trip that I just came off of a couple weeks ago. So I met Norma Bastida is actually through Southern California here, and she was on her way from Vancouver, Canada, where she lives now and has lived for the last 15 or so years, single mom, 2 boys, and she was running to Mazatlan, Mexico, the town that she grew up in, and she's got this thing in the 60s here because she did that in 64 days, and ran right along the coast all the way into Mexico, and she was doing that to raise awareness for her son's degenerative blindness disease. He's a teenager and is virtually blind, but he's also a chainsaw sculptor too. It's very interesting family. So we found out about her because she was running home to Mazatlan, and as she started getting closer and closer and closer to Mazatlan, she started shifting her mentality around a little bit from not just running this race to bring awareness to her son's disease, but as she started getting closer to home, she started revisiting her own childhood. And Norma grew up in Mazatlan, and from a young teenager till 18 years old, she was a victim of sexual violence. Her family members and others had exploited her in different ways and victimized her in different ways. And she managed to get through all of that and decided that she was going to move from Mazatlan to Mexico City, to where she could not have to endure the same trauma she was going through at home. And when she got to Mexico City, within a short time of being there, she was kidnapped with the intent to be trafficked and sold for sex. And she has a story of how an older brother of one of the traffickers and kidnappers came in and had this really bad feeling about keeping her. And so out of nowhere, they put her in a van and literally just dumped her out onto a corner of the road, and she was miraculously just freed. And so she said, I'm getting out of Mexico forever. And she took an exchange program to Japan, where some of the same abuses and issues continued to happen to her. So she just felt like no matter where she went, she was being chased by victimization and hunted down by it. And so as she was running closer to Mazatlan, she started revisiting some of this stuff in her childhood. And she said, hey, I need to do something to address what happened to me, and I need to do something to address what's happening to countless victims all around the planet, victims of human trafficking and exploitation. And so with all that said, She ends up connecting with Guido. Guido's here. He runs our LA office. Yeah, go ahead and tell Guido how much you love him for being a local guy. I'm from Boulder, Colorado, and so I'm in and out. I commute to LA. So Guido met her on the beach, and literally, as she was running to Mazatlan, was jogging along with her, trying to get the details of what was going on down in Santa Monica. And eventually she says, look, I want to do something to address this, and I need a nonprofit that's as crazy as I am. And Guido's like, I think you found us, you know. And she connected with some partners that we have in Tijuana, and specifically a woman by the name of Mary Soul. And Mary Soul was trafficked at age 13 from TJ to San Diego. And she was purchased for a couple $100s by an El Salvadoran gang member who kept her from 13 to 19 years old. And during those years, he had 3 children with her. She was pregnant for a 4th time, and as punishment, he threw her to the ground and literally stomped the baby out of her belly. She, at 19, was in the room when he murdered someone. And the same coercive techniques that he was using to keep her captive as a domestic servant and as a sex slave, knowing where her mom lived and threatening to hurt her mom if she didn't do what he said. He used those same coercive tactics to have her take the fall for his murder. And she spent 17 years in a Southern California prison. 17 years. It was a nun at the prison who had heard her story who kept saying, this is an innocent woman, this is an innocent woman. And the USC Law School heard about it. And they came together and took on a pro bono case, and they won and flipped the charges, and she got released. The governor of California pardoned her. And so for the last couple years, she's been a victim's advocate. And so her and Norma met. And when they met, it was like electricity went off. And so together, through all of these ladies, fierce women coming together, was an amazing thing. We ended up coming up with this idea that we were going to bring attention to this issue and empower survivors and create an anthem for what it means to survive things that have come against us. And so we had this idea. Originally, we were going to start in Cancun, Mexico, and she was going to do 25 Ironmans in a row and get to LA. We were going to finish in Los Angeles. Well, while we were doing that, one of her sports colleagues ended up saying, hey, we're going to do 30 and 30. And so they started doing something in Italy, and we said, well, we got to change it up to keep getting the attention that we need. So she came up with the idea. She goes, what if we go from capital to capital? And I said, well, now that's a great idea. Or can we do this, you know? And so she started in Cancun. She swam 120 miles in the ocean every morning, getting up at 4 a.m., hitting the water at sunrise, and she would swim half-mile circuit laps in the Caribbean Ocean. Once she got done with that, she switched to biking. And she biked from Cancun, Mexico, all the way through Mexico City, all the way up into Georgia, where she switched to running. And she ran from Georgia all the way to Washington, D.C., directly to the mall. We finished at the Washington Monument with Mexican officials and the ambassador and the U.S. State Department. The mayor's office hosted us. The United Nations got behind her. It was an amazing thing. But it took her 65 days, morning to night, to do this. Now, before I finish the story, I want to show you one more quick 30-second video. And I want to kind of open up our minds to what it's like that if we put ourselves to something, the kinds of crazy stuff that we can accomplish if we just try and we go and we do it. So watch this little video here, and I'll finish the story on Norma. So how powerful is that? So when we started talking about doing this a little over a year ago, I said, look, Norma, we're kind of a small but mighty nonprofit. We don't have a lot of margin of error for the kind of work that we do. We got to get it right. And my board and my supporters and people who partner with us at different levels, we're like, look, one twist of an ankle, blow out a knee, all of this time and energy and effort and momentum going into this could all be shut down, in a moment. And I was a little nervous about that. My wife called me in DC when Norma finished, and she says, were you emotional? Yeah, how was it? 65 days on the road. And I said, well, the first feeling I had was relief. We did it, she did it. And then the second feeling I had was a bit of resolve, like, okay, we did it, And then now what can we do? Now we're going somewhere with this, right? Well, I got up to Vancouver, where she lives now, a little over a year ago, to start filming some of the teaser footage, and we're building out the concept of what we were going to do. And so I had to go to her swim coach, who's a Canadian Olympic medalist swimmer. And she trains the Special Olympic team. So Norma trains with the Special Olympic swimmers. And so she's swimming, and her coach is like, this woman's crazy. She's like, I'm still trying to just teach her how to not dog paddle. And she's going to go and take on the ocean. And you want to know what Norma's response to all of that was? She's like, over the years, I've become known. Oprah's featured her. She's a well-known, especially in Mexico, ultra athlete. She's been on the cover of Runner's magazine. She's gotten a lot of press for some of the work that she's done. And she goes, you want to know why I needed to do the swim portion? Because I didn't want anyone who watches the documentary or the campaigns that are going to empowerment, human rights campaigns that are going to come out of this project. She's like, I didn't want anybody to think that, oh, well, that's Norma Bastidas. Of course she ran from Cancun to DC. She's a runner. That's what she does. She says, I had to figure out a way where people who looked at this says, well, she did that, but I can't do that. She says, I had to find something that I thought in my head I could not do. And then I had to step out and I had to work at it and train. And while we were all sleeping and eating and, going to work and going and watching movies and doing our thing, for a year, Norma was going to the pool, learning how to swim, going from dog paddle to breaststroke to the crawl, and it was amazing to watch it all happen. Crazy, crazy thing. And I think the message for us on this is very blatant and very clear. If she can do this, we can do something. Everybody can do something. Human trafficking is one of the most heinous crimes that's on our planet. It's new in the context of awareness. When I started dealing with this issue in the 90s, we didn't have a term for it. We didn't know what to call it. It was urban pimping. We were helping kids get, diverted out of gang life. We were helping girls from being victims. It's the exact same issues that we're talking about now. And if you rewind back, it's just historical. It just goes on and on and on in history, where people think that they have power over others, and they use that power for their own personal gain, and that comes out in a whole lot of different ways. And human trafficking is one version of how those kinds of things take place. But it all centers around the idea of injustice. Those things are just not right. They're just not right. And it's up to us to do something about these kinds of things. It's really up to us. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I want to empower you today. I want to encourage you and inspire you. I want Norma to encourage you, inspire you. I want some of the other media pieces that we're going to show you of some young girls who are rising up to fight injustice, that we can all come together as one collective voice and one collective movement. That's really where we need to be landing on a daily basis with these kinds of issues. There's all kinds of statistics. I'm not going to go into a human trafficking 101. I will invite you to go to our website or to the State Department's website and get involved with the TIP report and start figuring out what's going on around the planet. But there's all kinds of resources out there. But you can go to our website, iEmpathize.org, and you can find that out. I like hanging out with you ladies today. I love Women World Changers. I love how you guys are fierce. I love how you hold on to things that are important and not let go of them. And I want to say thank you for the way that you've supported us. I was asked to speak at a Film Society event on empowerment of women and through media and film. And it was a room of a couple hundred ladies, and it was just, I was on a panel with two other ladies. It was like I was the only guy in the room. And I came down, it was kind of a liberal audience. And I came down, and I got a heckler from the crowd who was like shouting out, "What are you doing on this panel? You're a dude. You don't even belong here, you know? And you know what? You don't have a voice in this kind of stuff," and you know, all this thing. And you know, and I was taken back a little bit. And then half the crowd started clapping with her, like, "Whoo, she's right." And I was a little intimidated, a lot intimidated, and you know, I stopped for a minute and I said, "Look, just before you guys run me out of here, there's a little known fact about me that many of you may not know, but I actually come from a woman. I've been married for 25 years, and I have 2 daughters and 2 sons. And the reality of these kinds of things that we're talking about, this isn't a gender issue. It's not about just women. It's not about just men. It's about all of us coming together and trying to figure out why these kinds of issues exist and what we can do to come together to make a difference." It was really interesting. I was coming through Selma, Alabama was one of the cities that we came through. We also came through Natchez, Mississippi, which has a lot of historical slavery and the human rights epicenter. Kind of what turned it was Selma, Alabama. And while we were there, I went to the martyrs, and we were telling kind of the story periphery along with Norma. We were telling the story and of the regions and the trafficking routes and ancient slavery and historical slavery and modern slavery, and you know, so all these stories come along with Norma's route. And we got to this the human rights and civil rights. It's like a monument set up for the martyrs of the civil rights movement. And there were many on this particular monument. There were as many white martyrs as there were black martyrs. And it really struck a chord with me on fighting these issues of gender inequality and the suppression and oppression and objectification of women by men. And it caught me for a minute on this very topic that, you know, it really did require the black and white community working together to annihilate the civil rights violations that were going on at the time. There were some big sacrifices that were being made at the time for that on both parts. And I believe that's a parallel for us as men and women working together with our children and not villainizing men, but understanding and giving empathy towards what's happened in the cultural perpetuation of the objectification of women and what it means for our young men to have to navigate these mindsets today, and for them to open their eyes to the reality of what pop culture says is not true. And so there's a lot that we have to work through there. But you know, it reminded me obviously of Martin Luther King and Norma. You know, this was a radical thing. When you think about Martin Luther King, you know, what a radical movement of reconciling injustices. When you think about what Norma did, what a radical thing to get up and, you know, swim 10 miles a day, you know, morning to night, to bike 120, 150 miles a day, morning to night, to run 40 plus miles a day, you know, consecutively, morning to night. That's radical stuff. And to change some of the human rights issues that we have today, especially of the community of faith coming together and leading the charge on so many of these things, you know, it almost is like, well, we have to do all these radical things to make them happen. And what I want us to understand is that just because none of us in this room are going to try and do the triathlon. I mean, maybe you are, and maybe we can make a documentary out. Talk to me afterward. But here's the deal. The things that Martin Luther King, the things that he was asking for, none of them were radical requests. For someone to drink out of the same water fountain, for someone to have the same education opportunities, so on and so forth. Those things were not radical requests. They're reasonable requests. Those are reasonable things to ask for. But it required a radical sacrifice by some for those reasonable requests to be met. And so for us to move forward on these kinds of issues, it demands of us to have radical and reasonable gestures coming together. Some of you may do something life-altering. You may sell your home. You may start a nonprofit. You may move. You may build an orphanage, in another country, or you may support something here locally. You may do something really crazy radical, right? But what it really demands of us is for all of us to do something, even in the normal rhythms of our lives, to do something reasonable on a regular basis to impact these kinds of issues. And when we mix together radical and reasonable gestures, we're able to move forward in a movement that is not just involving a few, but involving all of us. Involving all of us. So this was Norma's way of stepping into the issue. iEmpathize is the name of our organization. When you think about the idea of empathy, some people say, I don't quite know how to make the difference and the differentiation between sympathy and empathy. And this is kind of how we talk about it. A little bit of, subjectiveness to this, but this is really where I believe most of the problems that need to be reconciled in the area of injustices and human rights come from. You have people who have an apathetic posture and position in life, and there's a myriad of reasons why people suffer with apathy. It's not always that they're just cold-hearted criminals. Even people's own victimization causes us to disassociate and pull back. And because we want to get so far away from the problems that we've experienced in our own life, we surely don't want to get near other people's problems either. And so we distance ourselves, and then sometimes we get bitter and hurt and cynical, and sometimes we're just mean, and who knows what makes us an apathetic person, but there are people who live in that posture. And then you have the group that most of us fit in, which is sympathy. And sympathy sounds like a great response because it says, I care. I care about the suffering of others around me. The problem with sympathy is it's great for Hallmark greeting cards, but, it's really not good for transformation and social change. Sympathy says, I hate that it's happening. But again, for a myriad of reasons, we go, well, I don't know how to change it. I don't have capacity to change it. It's too big to change. And those are all things that we grapple with and deal with. And we just say to ourselves, these things just can't be dealt with. And I hate to see it, We see it on the TV, and it's like, oh, I hate that, I hate that, I hate that. But it's not enough to just hate that something happens. It's not enough to hate injustice. You have to love justice. And you can hate injustice and talk about it and push away from it, but if you love justice, you push in. And you try to reconcile something, you try to do something about the injustice that's happening, right? So empathy closes the gap on our disassociation from these issues, and it allows us to step forward into them and begin to do something. And even if you can't do something radical, you can do something what? Right. But it just requires us moving forward. And I'm not one to push you into the deep end of the pool. I don't want to do that to you because a lot of people get pushed in the deep end of the pool, don't want to ever get back in the pool. So it's okay that you wade in. It's okay that you start ankle deep. It's okay. Every brave kid swims to the deep end eventually because that's where the diving board and all the fun stuff is, right? So it doesn't matter. Just get in the game. Start educating ourselves, thinking through what it means that these things surround me and what it means to open up my eyes to see them and to do something about them. Okay? Empathy is this. In Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13, it says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin." So here we have this idea of even the concept of the gospel and the Messiah is built around the idea of empathy, entering in to someone else's suffering or to someone else's separation from the love of God. So here we've got the idea that God so loved the world that he sent, that he entered in, that he gave his son. His word, the word became flesh, right? And then here we have this description from the Hebrew writer who's saying, we don't have a high priest who's disconnected from us, but has literally walked in our shoes, who's literally put our skin on, and who's walked through the things that we walk through. Entering in is the key. How you enter in, what are the hurdles that keep you from entering in, that's the journey. That's the journey. And it's unique for each and every one of us. But we've got to move forward on the journey. Now, empathy is complex and a little bit abstract. And I'm surely not going to stand here as a man and say, I know what it's like to be consecutively raped night after night after night. I cannot walk in those shoes. So is it that I can't empathize? Am I no longer an empathizer? Am I relegated to doing nothing? Am I relegated to just feeling bad about that? See, empathy comes in different levels. Think about this. Ultimate empathy is I have suffered as you have suffered. When, Stacia, you were talking about, losing a child. Every person in here who's lost a child, you've suffered the same. There's a bond and a connection between that pain that you've gone through as a family, and only people who really have gone through that together can get it at that certain level. But even if you haven't suffered exactly as someone else has suffered, maybe you've suffered deeply but differently. That's still a bridge to be able to help someone who maybe suffered differently from you, but yet at the same time you can say, look, I get it. Mine was a little different, my story was a little different, but I get it, and I'm going to stand with you, and I'm going to be here with you because of that. But then there's this idea of like, look, if I can't walk in your shoes, I can at least walk with you. My aunt raised her daughter in a wheelchair, who she eventually passed away in her 20s, but from her being born to her 20s, Mama had to change the diapers, feed her, put her to bed, give her a bath every single day of that lady's life, young lady's life. Never once was my aunt in the wheelchair, but don't tell me she wasn't an empathizer. Don't tell me. She was there, she walked with her, she took care of her every single day. She lost her marriage over it, she lost friendships, career, all kinds of stuff, but she's an empathizer. This is the heartbeat of Jesus, to step in to the life of someone who suffers and to do something in that moment that no one else can do. And that's where his heart is upon us. Paul says it like this: the God of all comfort comes to me and he comforts me through my hard times and through my trials, so that I can comfort others with the same comfort I have received. These kinds of issues, when we're talking about them, they seem like they're just big, giant criminal problems. And so therefore we have to relegate them and push them off onto people who deal with big, giant criminal problems. We need to give it to policymakers. We need to give it to law enforcement. Lawyers need to be taken care of. Well, of course we need to give it over to law enforcement. And of course we need to have policy that engages these kinds of issues of human exploitation and human rights violations of all kinds. But the reality is, in every single community and in every single culture, it's what's happening within the people that then gets defined as criminal activity. So even though a lot of these issues that we're dealing with are criminal activities, and it requires a criminal response to that, they all begin as cultural issues and cultural problems. So we can't relegate our responses to how we deal with these kinds of issues to just the expert. What we have to be able to do is say, look, in the normal rhythm of my everyday life, there's got to be something that I can do to shift culture. And if all it is beginning to shift culture from apathy to sympathy to empathy, then we're going somewhere. Now, you know, I'm a believer. I'm passionate, you know, about my faith. But my human rights group is a Crimes Against Children 501c3 nonprofit. It allows us to get into schools, to work with governments, allows us to work at various levels. But the message of empathy translates to every person in every culture. And the essence of empathy is the gospel. And so it's not even about just the faith communities coming together to work together. It's not just, this is a human issue. And we're all created in God's image. And we must bring everybody to the table that we can. I had a big, huge event scheduled at Duke University. Big event. And then there was an event in Colorado Springs that had a few conservative folks at it. There's a lot of conservative folks that live in Colorado Springs. And Focus on the Family was one of the people there, and a few other churches sponsored, and they brought us in, and Duke Googled us. And they were like, oh, wait, you're going to be featured at this event where Focus on the Family's there, and these others are there. And they're like, we're canceling everything with you. What a sad story that because a liberal mindset. So I wrote Duke a letter, and the Human Rights Board a letter. I said, all I'm asking for you to do for me now is to tell me what other groups out there in the United States and around the world that you don't want me to talk about human trafficking with. Just keep making recommendations since you seem to be so good at this. Now, I would have been just as upset if Focus on the Family had canceled me because I went to Duke. Just as upset. We have to come together to begin to fight these issues and to move forward in them. They're cultural issues. And no matter what our mindset is, our background is, our economic background, the diversity in this room, we all have to pull ourselves together to fight these issues, male and female. The reason why they're so hard to deal with is these issues are just so heavy and so heinous. And it's a significant hurdle that we all have to try to overcome. And I want to shift our gears towards that. Here, how much more time do I have? Wow. All right, here we go. So let me just tell you a little bit about what our organization does, and then I want to come in. I want to land some stuff also with things that you've been partnering with us on. I want to give you some sneak peeks into some work that you guys have been helping us do and support. But let's... So iEmpathize is eradicating child exploitation is our goal, pulling it up from the ground. But we use media and we go into different community sectors. So here's the idea. Every one of us crosses paths with these issues. Some of us cross paths in a preventative way. Some of us cross paths in an interventionist kind of way. Some of us cross paths in an aftercare way. Some of us cross paths with this issue in an advocacy form. There's a lot of different ways that we cross paths with this issue. And I would say one of the things that we try to define and help people understand is breaking our communities into three spaces: the home space, the social space, and the workspace. The home space is obviously our friends and our families and our neighborhoods and the zip codes that we live in and where we go back and forth on a daily basis. The workspace is pretty clear. If you're a student, it's your school. If you're, an accountant, it's your firm. If you're, a nurse or a doctor, it's the hospital or your care facility. So we all have a workspace. And some of us very strategically cross paths with these issues. My first United States project was empowering a certain demographic, the trucking industry. I never dreamed in my life as a musician and young guy coming up that one day I'd spend a whole lot of my time with truckers, but I do. And some people say, oh yeah, you got to go after those truckers, man. Those guys, they're buying all the girls. They're the boat captains of the transatlantic slave trade in modern day form. They're transporting people from point A to point B. You go get them, Brad. No. That's not what we're talking about. Yes, some of those things are true. And there are some bad guys. Well, guess what? There are bad guys everywhere. Bad guys, this is the cool thing about the bad guy thing, is the good guys always outnumber the bad guys. Always. Always. But you just have to empower the good guys, right? So the strategy with the trucking industry, yeah, it's about the few bad guys. Let's take care of that, and let's, suppress and punish, people who break the law. But guess how many truck drivers are on the road today? Thousands, millions, 500,000, 1 million, 1.5 million, 2 million, 2.5, no. The estimates are just in the United States that there's about 3 million truck drivers on the road today, male and female. So get this, they're the eyes and the ears of our nation's highways. If you can give them an Amber Alert, did you guys get the Amber Alert today on your phones? What if you train truck drivers who are out there every single day? Some urban drivers, delivering packages and deliveries on a local level, some, cross country, they're on the trafficking routes. If you can empower the truck driver to recognize and respond to human exploitation in the normal rhythm of their life, then they can do it. So we started going at the trucking industry, partnering with my friend Candice Paris, and we started working this thing together. By the way, she's the one who really takes care of business with the trucking industry. So it's a lady who was she was NCAA basketball she's a very powerful, competitive woman. And she puts, every one of those guys in the trucking industry, like, yes, ma'am, whatever you want me to do. You want me to help you help kids? I'll help you help kids. She's that fierce. But, now truckers are the fastest growing demographic, intervening and calling in to the national hotline. Fastest growing demographic. The United Nations just named the trucker initiative that we work on as one of the top 100 practices fighting human trafficking. And we're not asking truckers to go into schools, even though we do have a couple truckers who do that. They go in and educate. But we're not asking them to do it. We're asking them to just, in the normal rhythm of their life, connect, see where their intersection's at. And we're not asking teachers to drive trucks. Okay? So it's about finding our intersection. Where do we cross paths? And we could have a workshop and start brainstorming on all the different careers that cross paths with this issue. But the most upstream way of dealing with this issue is in our neighborhoods and in our homes and in our families. That's the most upstream that we can go, right? And we need to have an upstream response. We're never going to fix this problem by having reactive responses. And I'm sorry to tell you, but law enforcement and policy are reactive. They try to come on with some proactive, but for the most part, it's reactive. Aftercare is absolutely necessary, an indispensable part of fighting this issue, but it's not about ending the issue. In some ways it is, because when you empower victims, they authenticate the reality of that it's happening, and then they become the voice. Don't ever use "I'm a voice for the voiceless," by the way. Okay, I don't like that phrase. Because what you're saying is that victims don't have voices. Okay? What we have to be is an amplifier for the voice. And we can add our voice. Right? We can add our voice. One big collective shout is one of the ways my friend calls it. But it's about intersections. And we got to figure out where those intersections are at in our culture, community, and then you have the social space. So you have home spaces, social spaces. The social space, we come together as believers in community of faiths. We come together in the barbershop, in the coffee shop. We come together at the lunch. We come together on the golf course. We come together beauty salons, shop. Wherever we gather outside of home and work, there's something in that space that also has to engage this issue. This is where we see a lot of entertainment, pop culture that feeds these kinds of problems, glorifies pimp culture, continues to make it acceptable to objectify women. And so those are in the social spaces that we have to deal with this issue. So it's a big cultural shift, right? And we have to all work together to fight these problems. This will help us begin to understand the complexity of what we're dealing with and why it's going to require all of us working on it. This is a media piece that is going to be included in our launch of our new school curriculum and teen curriculum that your wonderful group helped fund. Yes. And so this is a young lady from Los Angeles who survived sexual violence and trafficking as a young teenager. And she's 17 in this video. And she's a creative kind of type. And she's got a poem. And I'm going to let you hear her poem. I'm going to tell you her story. And it's going to unpack a little bit of the complexity of this issue and why we need all hands on deck.
Who's the girl? Just wanted respect. Who's the girl? Her innocence she must protect. Who's the girl? So aware, yet so confused. You can't trust in her because she won't trust in you. Who's the girl? Lost, yet so found. Who's the girl? I often hear her weeping sound. Who's the girl? Stuck in the same world with different faces. Who's the girl? Looking for love in all the wrong places. Who's the girl? Running through every open door. Who's the girl? Searching for something that's worth searching for. Some people say it's respect. This girl will forgive, but she just can't forget. Who's the girl? Haunted by her past, wanting to be first, expecting to be last. Who's the girl? What happened to her passions? Who's the girl? She gave it to her past hymns. Who's the girl? Two people in one person in two. This girl has been misled into believing the lies are true. Who's the girl? Soft, but acting tough, only to avoid the struggle. She's just been through enough. Who's the girl that even when she's stuck, it doesn't matter what, 'cause she won't give up? Who's the girl? Someday, one day, will break free. Who is this girl? That girl, she's me.
So here's the complexity of her story. It involves Facebook. It involves an overwhelmed mom who was also a victim of sexual exploitation and abuse as a teenager, who got in her own cycles of abuse because of what she went through. So you've got difficulty in the home with single mom and a mom who's a survivor of sexual violence and exploitation. You also have in this scenario her brother, who's a year or so older than her, who's constantly being groomed and recruited for gang activity. Same way that she's being groomed for victimization, he's being groomed to be a victimizer. Okay? In the same situation, you've got two other friends. 13-year-old, who's a friend of hers, who a pimp had come in and created what I call a Romeo pimp, came in and created this pretender boyfriend relationship. And then this 13-year-old girl started to become the recruiter and pulled in Samantha, her name's been changed, and another girl. So they all get pulled in from Long Beach and Compton area, and now you've got this scenario here where he's starting to take these three young girls to parties, show them a lifestyle. The girls don't have much at home that keeps them there, so it's just feeding the fuel of his agenda. And then eventually he starts prostituting them out. And the cops come by and they catch a 40-year-old man having sex with a 13-year-old girl. Okay? That's how it all got busted. The 40-year-old man gets a ticket and goes home. Those 3 girls get arrested and go to jail. Okay? So here you've got this incredible social complex problem that needs to be solved. And it's got a lot of layers and there's a lot of issues that come with it. It's a difficult thing to take care of. So then there's policies and law that's starting to be passed that says, how dare we arrest children who are victims and give them a criminal record? How dare we do that? So then we come up with laws called the safe harbor law, right? Well, now you have to understand the police never really view these girls as criminals, but they use the prostitution laws to arrest them so they can get them away from the pen. But you're still labeling them as a criminal and taking them through the arrest process. There's a lot of problem with that, right? Well, then a safe harbor law comes up that says, okay, well now you can't label these victims as criminals, but all of a sudden you lose the power to hold them. And now the recidivism issue starts kicking in and the girls start going back to the street because there's no way to pull them off. So there's all kinds of issues and problems that are here that we have to try to figure out and sort out. And it's such a big problem that it's so hard to sort out. This is the empathy equation. This is what we call this. So sympathy is less than empathy, and empathy is greater than apathy. So this is a social problem. And then empathy equals ending it. So if these problems are bigger than just what a judge could handle or a cop could handle, then what that means is we've got to all work together. My mom was an algebra teacher. I am not good at algebra. My son's graduating high school in the morning, and he pulled an all-nighter with his grandma just to be able to walk tomorrow on algebra. So takes after his father. But my mom used to tell me, you're never going to solve that problem by walking away from it. You're never going to solve that problem unless you take time to look at it, to break it down, to wrap your mind around it. And you might need a little help understanding the problem. You might need a group of people to help you solve the problem, but you're never going to do it if you walk away from it. And the problem is these issues are so dark. The problems are so big that we want to just walk away from them. But I was in Carlsbad Cavern as a little kid. And we also have an oil boom program where 40,000 men in Williston have descended upon Williston, North Dakota, and it's a big trafficking problem. We always get worked up over the Super Bowl and World Cup where, you have a group of men in for a weekend. In North Dakota, we got 40,000 men displaced from their family working in oil fields on a daily basis. It's like the Super Bowl every single day. So traffickers are all up there. So we were down in Carlsbad, New Mexico, doing an entire training for the entire city because there's an oil boom coming to them. And so they don't want to fall into the same trap as Williston. So we're down there. Carlsbad Cavern, very memorable for me as a kid because I remember going to the bottom with my family, my mom. They turned the lights off to show us how dark it was in the bottom of the cave. And, I was pretty young and that kind of freaked me out, right? And so I go over and I, grab my mom's, leg and I'm holding on for dear life. And then the lights come back on and it's not my mom. It's the lady next to her. So there's a little bit of a stir going on in the bottom of the cave that day. But sometimes these problems are just that dark and that difficult to deal with. Look at how Isaiah said this. He said, so justice is far from us and righteousness does not reach us. We look for light, but all is darkness. For brightness, but we walk in deep shadows. Like the blind, we grope along the wall, feeling our way like people without eyes. At midday, we stumble as if it were twilight. Among the strong, we are like the weak and the dead. And when we begin to look at these kinds of issues and the kinds of issues that Isaiah was looking at, which involved human exploitation that was surrounding him, a lot of some similar issues that Isaiah is talking about here, we're talking about today. And he's saying, look, these kinds of problems aren't just dark, they're like double darkness. Did you catch what he was saying there? He's like, it's like I'm a blind man groping around in the dark. If you're blind, it's already dark. And if you can see, if the lights are off and you're at the bottom of Carlsbad Caverns, you can't see anyway. And he says it's like I'm blind and the lights are off. That's how big these kinds of problems can be. And if we have these kinds of problems that are this big, then we need some big answers, and we need a lot of people working on the answers. How much time do I have left? 10 minutes. Perfect. You're helping solve these problems. I'm going to give you a sneak peek even further into the curriculum that you're helping develop. So, obviously we don't show Samantha's identity or use her real name. The next video you're about to see is a young lady from Colorado who you are going to see her face. But and she was a trafficking victim, horrible story of being trafficked on Colfax, one of the big avenues in Denver, the track, and at 14, 15 years old. But we don't tell the audience the details of her victimization, but we give them enough, the students, enough to be able to go, this girl gets it. And so the entire curriculum is built around young teenagers who have gone through all kinds of heinous issues, ranging from bullying all the way to human trafficking and forced prostitution. And they tell other teenagers, if I could go back in time and navigate, this is how I would have done it. And the entire curriculum is built around empathy. And we're so excited about it, and so are a lot of people, a lot of school districts and systems. It's really got some buzz. We're excited. It's getting ready to get out there, okay? We also have an illustrated version of this for 10 to 12-year-olds. The average age of a child who enters into prostitution is around 12 years old, 12 to 14 years old. So again, we got to go upstream. One of Norma's milestones was crossing the Mississippi River. And where she crossed it in Natchez, I mean, it's a raging, rushing river. But if you go up to Minnesota, where it begins, you can literally step across the Mississippi River. Think about that imagery as it relates to prevention. If you're trying to deal with the problem downstream, you're going to have troubles being able to handle the power and the rage of it. But if we take our time to go upstream and find out what's poisoning the water upstream, instead of trying to filter it and dip out all the problems, we go up there and say, where's the source of the problem? This is the idea of us getting into younger and younger kids' lives, telling the story in a way that relates and connects, helping teachers, helping people who intersect with kids, and helping families and parents and foster families be able to deal with these high-risk situations. So that's what this is really about. And we'll watch this, and then I'll just close this out with what I believe needs to be a collective response that we should all be involved in.
My name is Taylor, and iEmpathize. I had a pretty typical childhood, I would say, from the outside. I was a very typical kid. I did sports, I loved art, was very talkative, very much attached to my father. And from the outside, I looked like a typical, normal young adult, but I had a rough childhood. I myself had struggled with an alcoholic father, sexual abuse, physical abuse, self-mutilation, addiction, living on the streets. So when my dad drank, he was very angry and very much abusive. So my dad was physically abusive, bad. Starting from like 4, so it was something that, I dealt with pretty severely on a daily basis that nobody knew about. It didn't feel good. It made me feel like I didn't deserve to be loved the way that other kids were loved. It was really, there was a lot of shame that went with it. You know, why isn't my father, or why does other people not have to deal with it and I have to deal with it? So I witnessed my dad take his life. He shot himself, and his last words to me were "F you," and that was detrimental to my life. After he took his life, I lost everything. I lost my home, I lost my family, every physical possession I had, and I was just taken and I was placed into foster care where I did not have a good experience. So after that, I went onto the streets, and by choice, I figured if bad things are going to happen, I might as well be the cause of the bad things. That way I could have some sort of control in the situation. This is what empathy means to me. It's really important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to open yourself up to the fact that, you know, other people hurt too. And it's not just about you. And this world isn't just you. I think sometimes we live in these very selfish, self-centered cycles where it's all about us. We're the only one that's hurting. We're the only one that's been, you know, done wrong. It's all about us. And really you need to open it up to the fact that you could be in a room with 20 people and 18 of them can be going through something that's heartbreaking. And it may not be the same situation that you have, but it's heartbreaking. And what they look for is your weaknesses and things that you feel like you need to fulfill a need. And that's what they prey on. They're going to become what you lack. So if you are lacking a boyfriend or that love relationship with somebody, they're going to become that relationship to you so that it draws you to them. If you're lacking a father figure, they're going to become this father figure. And they necessarily probably won't start out like that until they know that that's something you struggle with or something that you don't have. And then once they find out this weakness, then their whole demeanor changes to fit what you need. The next thing you know, you're making some horrible choices that you would never make, and you're being manipulated into situations that you didn't start out in.
Sorry about the out of sync audio there with the technology, but so here's Taylor giving advice. In addition to this, there's Illustrator, who's also a young artist who's doing illustrations. There's a young man who his mom was raped and he was birthed out of that rape, and he was bitter and cynical about it. And some of the guys from the street started reaching out to him. They had a hip hop kind of poetry class, and they started bringing him in, and he became a really incredible beat poet. And he's written on the different themes. This is a 5-module program that educators and people who work with at-risk kids can use. The day 1 is about empathy. Module 2 is about the pushes in someone's life that pushes you out into vulnerability that you can't control. They just happen to you. Module 3 is about the negative pulls. Who's out there that wants to disguise themselves in a way where they can get into your life and pull you down to the worst version of what your life could be? And then the positive pull. Who's out there in your life? Who are the people? Where do you go find the folks? How do you know who they are? Who can make your life go down the best possible path? And then module 5 is just these responses. How do I get this thing into my life? And so we've got, this is just version 1.0, and you guys help fund this. You help put it together. We've got Detroit Public Schools. We've got the New York, the Long Beach Task Force, Long Beach schools are looking at this. I mean, there's just a long list of people who are wanting to use this. We're translating this into English and Spanish. The program, not that particular piece, but different parts of the program. This is what Norma's helping us with Be Relentless. The United Nations is helping us distribute our materials into Mexico and into the United States. And so you guys are all a part of this. It's a collective response. So let me give you this last picture, not only to encourage you, but to continue to challenge you to keep doing what you're doing. So let's look at this Basin Park Hotel. I want to help you get this. This is the Basin Park Hotel on the left. It's in the Ripley's, believe it or not. It's in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. My dad grew up in that area, and so I'm familiar with this little Swiss Alps of the Ozarks, they call it. And this little hotel is an 8-story hotel. It's in Ripley's, believe it or not, because it's an 8-story hotel where every floor is a ground floor. Isn't that interesting? Every floor is a ground floor. And the reason why every floor is a ground floor is because it's built into a mountain. So you can be on the 8th floor and you can walk literally out onto the ground and exit the hotel. Okay? On the 7th floor, you do the same thing. 5th floor, you do the same thing. 3rd floor, okay? The thing about this too is, once you're in the hotel, you can go up and down in the elevator or the stairs from floor 7, 6, 5, 3, whatever it is. I think this is an incredible metaphor for how we deal with these kinds of issues. We have to enter in at all levels. We have to enter in our homes and neighborhood spaces. We have to enter in the social spaces. We can't let pop culture continue to dictate the mindset of our kids in the future. We have to enter in and have conversations with our kids, our nephews, our nieces, our neighbors, our friends. We have to confront the apathy that's out there, and we have to evoke empathy. And we have to come at it at all different levels with all different skill sets, from policy all the way down to grassroots efforts. We have to all do it together. That's how we tackle this issue. So don't say, well, awareness doesn't work, or, oh, you're just an awareness, or, well, we're obviously far more than doing just awareness, but awareness and education and helping people understand the issue is the pathway to empathy. Because when you understand it and you get it, you're not okay with it. And when you get it and you're not okay with it, you start to be a part of the tribe that says, not on my watch. Okay? And no matter how big the problem is, the more people who get involved, the better we're going to solve it. In Colorado, you guys have heard about the floods and the fires. Those floods and fires, one responder looking at 5 houses burning or 20 people trapped on their roofs during a flood can do very little to solve it. And you can try and risk your own life and maybe lose your own life. And all of a sudden you start thinking through, I'm in over my head. I can't deal with this big of a problem. And there's consequences to that. You walk away feeling like that you've let everyone down. Everyone who needed you, you couldn't get to them. You couldn't help them. It was too big for you to deal with it. You go away feeling guilty and ashamed. And then you just go, I'm never going to look at that stuff again. I'm never going to try to respond to something that's in need again, because last time I did it, bad things happened. We didn't fix the problem. We couldn't get along as a team. It all unraveled. You need the gift of re-ravel, because we're always going to unravel. Somebody asked me what my number one job was on the trip with Norma and our crew of 12. I was like, I had to really pray for the gift of re-raveling. Because we were always unraveling. You just got to keep it all together, right? But what changes the scenario when 5 houses are on fire and there's only one person to respond? What changes that scenario? You call for help and you get 2 responders, 10 responders. It's the exact same scenario. 5 houses are burning and people are in trouble. It's the exact same scenario. Nothing changes, but when you add people to the equation and more people step in, the problem that couldn't be solved suddenly gets solved.
Okay, wow. I want to thank you, Brad. I'm so grateful, because we have had the pleasure and blessing of knowing Brad for a while now, and you just explained our whole journey. I went from ignorance to sympathy to empathy. That's the whole deal. And anyway, I loved you. It was amazing. And I hope you're all just inspired to go do something. So, okay, we are going to enter into one of our vow of silences right now. And we're going to enter into a quiet time. And I just wanted to kind of remind you of that. After that, you've got to have some stuff going through your head right now that you want to just think about and ponder. So take your little booklets, and we'll meet back here. Are we right on time, gals? Okay, so we're going to meet back here right at 4 o'clock. And if you are a letter reader, you know who you are. We are going to see you right over here by these stairs. Okay, so thank you guys. Just let the Lord just kind of lead your thoughts and your writing down. And Brad, thank you. Yes. Right, that is true. Brad has to leave, sadly, to go to his son's graduation. We're so grateful you came out. I mean, thank you so much. His table is right out front, and they have to leave. So if you want to go check out that table, just do it quietly, okay? God bless you guys. Enjoy your time with the Lord.